For this part, we are going to talk about the guidelines for constructing objective type of tests or true or false and binary. So the same guidelines for, it's similar to type of test to get when you're giving your students statements and they will identify whether it's correct or not, or it's a yes or no. Maybe for elementary students, given a story or given a short passage and all that. So same guideline. So this is also similar with agree, disagree type of test. So they are very good in terms of measuring facts, or if you want to measure students' ability to identify whether statements of facts, whether statements of principles, or generalization, or determining relationships, or evaluating whether statements are correct. So you can also consider this type of test for your students. They're very good for, if you want to determine whether the definition is correct or if the formula is correct, and dates and names, although they can be very trivial. So some of the advantages for constructing this type of test is that they're easy to construct. They can test a lot of different subject areas and generally easy to read. So also they are easy to score, of course, because they're objective. So it's just correct or not, and there's no need to consider something, or that they can be subjective, just like essay questions, or like some of the limitations in the completion or that short answer test. This one, they have to respond just right or wrong, true or false, yes or no. It can really cover a lot of ground in given time. I mean, for a 10-item true or false, you wanted to determine if they have grasp of concept. So an entire 10-item test can also already let you determine if they have understood the concept, and that for like chapters 1 and 2 and 3, like that. So it's really good for testing popular misconception. I mean, if you give them a statement that is a common misconception and they say that's true, that will really tell you that they have that misconception. It will also help you like address that in the classroom. So that helps in your assessment. So the disadvantages, what few of the disadvantages is sometimes because of this type of test, it will only just test rote memorization. So low level of thinking skill, remember in the Bloom's taxonomy, is just at the understanding, probably at the comprehension level or knowledge level. Or remembering level. And it's also a 50-50 percent chance, meaning that if the student, there are just two choices, true or false. And if they wrote their true and it is correct, there's really that misleading interpretation from us when we are looking at the assessment, that we may think they get it right, but it's possibly that they just chose true, something like that. So that's one of the issues for giving this true or false questions. So that's why because guessing is encouraged, it's easy to cheat. And then they offer little diagnostic value, meaning if they got a correct answer, since it's just 50-50, it's possible that we might think they get it right, but really it's just because there are just two choices. And then of course, one of the challenges in constructing true or false tests is that it's kind of impossible to get really absolute statements. It's really true that it's absolutely false at all times. So those are some of the challenges. And that's the reason why when we are constructing, we have to choose statements that must be unequivocal. So that was why that's kind of a challenge or a disadvantage, because the guideline for constructing true or false test is that we have to create statements that must be unequivocally true, and or it must be unequivocally false. So true or false has to be true for that particular statement that you're giving. It has to be true all the time, false all the time. And of course, let us make each statement as significant as possible. If it's just trivial question, you may not want to include them in your true or false, like you're just, asking for the birth of a person, or the year where this one is, this particular famous, let's say, theorist or inventor, what year this person was born. So I mean, I'm sure you wanna, or you please do consider that true or false can be powerful for really determining misconceptions. So you might wanna really just consider true or false for that one, not for trivial questions. So, and then of course, include only one central idea in each statement. No several ideas in a statement that might confuse our students. So another is that please avoid specific determiners, like frequently, in most cases, always, sometimes. They should not be in your true or false question or item. So say, for example, this one, in most cases, anecdotal records is an alternative method to written tests. It has to be unequivocally true and equivocally false at all times, okay? So let's just say, for example, this particular statement: the governor in Montana is always elected to that office. You might revise that. The Constitution describes how governors are elected, so you might want to consider that. Another guideline when you're constructing true or false question is we avoid negative and particularly double negative statement. So like, for example, none of the steps made by the student was unnecessary. So if I give this true or false question to my education students, that can be very confusing, and that can also be possibly misread by my students. And so that will not give me the assessment that I wanted. That will not help me determine which at what particular part they had misconception, and that will not also help me address their needs, and that will not also help me clarify if ever there are things that I need to clarify in the classroom. So please avoid creating negative or double negative statements in your true or false question. So of course, related to that, keep the statement short and use simple language. So an example of a poorly constructed true or false question is like, true or false, election procedures during the early days of the country require many steps and discourage many people from running for office. So if it's kind of long and there are so many ideas in one statement, they're hard to follow. And then so there may be parts that are true that the student will agree. There may be parts where it can be false. So it can be confusing for them. So one central idea and keep the statement short. So that's a suggestion there. And of course, do not have a pattern in the order of responses. I know that for some teachers, it will also help them when they're checking, but our students can automatically spot if there is a pattern. So please avoid that. But if you're using technology like Moodle or a Google form, and then you click that your items will be shuffled and all that, so that would also address this issue. But also when you have 10 items, approximately half the statement should be false, half the statement should be true. Okay. And then there should be no trick questions. Again, why are we emphasizing that there's no trick question? Because this is not the point when we are constructing, when we are creating an assessment. I mean, we want to assess because we really wanted to determine degree of knowledge, degree of skill developed, and so that we will be able to address that, so that we will really be able to assign appropriate grades and be able to maybe provide additional intervention or information or additional resources. So we go back always to the point why we're assessing our students. And of course, paraphrase source materials before including them on the test. I mean, one of the issues when we construct a true or false test is when we just lift it up from our book and then put it on a true or false, and so that can be a copyright issue. So of course, number 12, directions to students have to be clear, and scoring method has to also be very clear. So do not just put their true or false and then we expect our students to know what to do. Encircle the word, like for example, this is an example of the direction of a true or false. Encircle the, if you're using paper, encircle the word true, especially for little kids. If it, or if it is, if the statement there is correct, and if the statement is wrong, encircle false. So why encircle, not ask to really write? If you're dealing with kids, writing may take time, and since that is not something that we are trying to measure, then you might want to find ways that it is not a writing assessment, or it's not a spelling assessment. So I want you to critique on this. Write through of the statement is all. Number 1, divorce is an option when marriage is on the rocks. Okay. So if you said, well, that's not a good true or false item because that can be opinionated, or that can be based on opinion, and this is not aligned to the first guideline, which is statements in a true or false type of test must be unequivocally true or unequivocally false. So number 2, multiple choice frequently have 3 options. So if I'm going to give you this, one of the guidelines says we have to avoid determiners such as frequently, always, sometimes, in most cases, all this. Let's avoid that in a true or false item. So if that was your critique, or on the right track. Number 3, a test is not reliable if it cannot be scored objectively. If you said that this is not a good item because it is negatively stated, again, true or false items has to be positively stated. So this can be confusing and this can be misread. And of course, this is double negative. So also not in adherence to the true or false item. So say, for example, this one, alcoholism is a disease, which can be some sort of debatable, but you can also say according to our textbook or according to the author in our textbook, alcoholism is a disease. That would be clearer. Okay, so that would be guidelines in creating your this type of test, the true or false or your binary choice. I hope this will help us come up with quality items.